Listeners of the deep below, we welcome you to a new story, and as always, ask you to visit the author's work, as well as visit us on other social media platforms. Welcome to the story. It was a sultry August afternoon. Sequential misfortunes had brought a man of even my wealth to sitting on a rugged bus stop bench. It was little things like my phone being dead, my driver being on vacation with his wife and children, and the unfortunate lack of taxis in the city I was doing business in. So, I found a bus stop shelter, found a route that would take me to my next meeting, and waited. It was the weekend, so the buses did not come as regularly as they did. I would not have minded it that much if I wasn't wearing a full business suit. I was sitting there for about 10 minutes when he came up and sat next to me and looked me up and down. The first thing that struck me about the man was that he looked like a Dmitri Shostakovich, the Russian composer. He was dressed well, but unsuitably so for the weather, just like myself. He wore a well-fitting green jacket with pockets on both breasts. A red sash was wrapped around the right arm, which nudged against mine in the close quarters of the park bench. He wore dark jeans with brown, heavy boots. "After work, even on a day like this?" he asked me. His tone was gentle but brotherly. I did not feel repelled from him like I normally did with strangers, especially ones found at a bus stop in such a quiet part of town. He seemed to light up even this quiet part of town. "I'm afraid so," I replied. He sighed a thoughtful hum. I thought the conversation was done after this little colloquialism. I had thought it was a gentle moment between two men, and nothing more than that. "What work do you do?" he asked. I entertained his curiosity. "I'm a hedge fund manager." He grunted. Even without glancing at him, I could sense that he was disappointed. "Generating wealth from wealth," he said. "How does that work then?" The bus would not come for some time. I hoped this would not become a long, exhausting discourse on the evils of my work. Nevertheless, I felt a strange connection towards the man, so I gave him a simple explanation. "It's simply calculated risk. My work deals in taking potential financial blows so that other people do not have to." "Then how are you so wealthy?" "Who says I'm wealthy?" I said with a smirk, holding up my hands, revealing my Rolex. He did not seem to take the joke. "For every one of me, there are 100 who are in financial ruin because of a risk they should not have taken. Well, not 100, but certainly a proportion similar to that." "So you profit from the misfortune of others?" he continued. There was a pause. I wanted to reply with a cutting rebuttal, but the conversation was reaching a point that simply did not deserve my attention. However, the man laughed knowingly and patted my knee. "I'm sorry," he said gently. "I did not mean to offend you." "What do you do then?" I asked. redirecting the conversation to a more gentle place. "I'm a beekeeper," he responded. "It is a much more simple life than being a hedge fund manager, I can imagine." "I dare say it is," I reply. "Do you like it?" "I do," he said with a certainty that put me on edge. 5 minutes before the bus arrived, I noticed a bee resting upon the cuff of the man's left sleeve. I pointed to it, asking jokingly, "Is that one of your bees, then?" To which he replied, as thought it were not a mystical thing, "It is." When the bus arrived, the beekeeper quipped up, "If you want to go to the downtown area," he said, "you are better off taking the next bus." I frowned at him and looked at the bus driver for a second opinion. However, the bus driver had quickly shut the doors and sped away. I sat back down on the bench helplessly. To my luck, the next bus came almost immediately after. Upon its arrival, both myself and the beekeeper rose from the bench. I gestured the man to enter before me, and he nodded his thanks and climbed onto the bus, myself shortly after. The bus was empty. I put a $5 bill into the fare box, and the bus driver indifferently pressed a button which printed my ticket and dispensed my change. His eyes were unblinking, and he moved as though he were a rag doll. I settled into a seat in the back of the bus, the beekeeper sitting a few rows ahead of me. The sun shone warmly onto my face, and I began to feel sedated by it. My limbs relaxed at my sides, and my eyelids grew heavy. I knew the downtown district was distant, so I did not mind falling asleep. In fact, I felt rather peaceful. The last thing I remember before I slipped into a slumber was the keeper turning around slowly to look at me. It did not bother me that his eyes bulged, or that his glasses were missing, or how his face was twisted into a warped smile, or even how there were thousands of insects crawling out of his sleeve. All was peaceful, and I slept. It was dark, and the air was sweet. There was an orchestra playing, but it was not of horns and strings. Rather, the sound came from thousands of bees flying all around. The usual din of buzzing revealed as music. They did not touch nor clamor in my vision, but rather passed in and out of the darkness a few at a time, so they looked like falling stars. A gelatinous figure sat in front of me. In the mess of what appeared to be honey, glass, and scraps of glass was the recognizable face of the man I had met just moments before. It was just a few moments, was it not? It spoke with a fleshy, guttural tone.
I'm sorry.
It said. "Sorry for what?" I replied. I noticed, however, that no sounds came from my throat. My throat was far too relaxed to function. The response only existed as a thought, yet still, the voice responded.
All was supposed to be peaceful, but I have failed. Soon the music will be dim. Soon the sweetness will turn sour. And soon all will be revealed to you as it is.
I smiled, even if my face did not. It could never be then. Though, as if to disprove me, as if to show my statement to be a naive denial, the bees began not to sing, to buzz. It began with one wrong note, then another, then another. Soon, the flow and rhythm faded entirely. A bright light began to glow, revealing the walls to be layers upon impenetrable layers of honey. I began to become aware of my limbs. They were fragile, stick-like things, constrained and contorted by strands of strange, golden silk.
I'm sorry.
The voice coughed. Within the layers of the wall, I saw the contorted forms of people. There were children in school uniforms. There was the bus driver that drove away. Below me, sunken deep into the floor, I saw my wife. Her face was rotted, and her bones stuck out of her skin. A pang of fear and sorrow shot through me.
I'm sorry.
The voice spat. I noticed that my stomach was rumbling with hunger. I felt that my mouth was dry as a desert, and I felt painful sores where my teeth used to be.
It was meant to be bliss.
The voice cried.
It was all meant to wash away the pains of the world.
I began to feel nauseous. I began to flail my limbs helplessly in the air, and my right femur snapped under the duress. Terrible pain shot through my body. A sickly, black liquid erupted from my mouth and onto the sickening pile of the man. I began to cry. My voice had come back, but my throat was torn, and my lips were crusted and brittle. A deep rumbling began to echo through the chasm. The walls of honey began to crumble, reveal tens, then hundreds, then thousands of people hung up, just like I was. They all cried in agony and fear, just as I did. The form in front of me with the face I once knew fell into the chasm below. The bees began to fly freely in and out of people. I wanted to cry, but they forced themselves down my throat, their stingers ravaging my mouth and my throat. Soon, the walls of the masses faded as they forced themselves into my ears. My eyes were forced shut, and against my body was thousands and thousands of their soft, hairy bodies. The golden strands that held my body withered and snapped, and I fell. I have been falling. I don't think I will ever stop falling. Yet somehow, with my broken bones, my ravaged corpse, I'm still awake.